And it's now my pleasure to introduce Durward Watson and Michael Kaufman. Durward and Michael.
Okay.
We are not going to be nearly as well organized as the previous speakers.
We have no prepared notes to misread, so don't worry about that. Thank you all for allowing us to be here tonight. It's kind of remarkable to have the ability to tell stories that we have been telling for a very long time to a new audience and let y'all hear them. Durward and I are a little more long-term couple. We are a product of the Turtle Creek Chorale, and also a product of a time long ago when things were perhaps a little freer in the gay community, pre-AIDS, pre-HIV. So when we first met, I was very attracted to Durward, but he had other things in mind.
Well, okay. Anyway, as Michael mentioned, we had met in the Turtle Creek Chorale, and both of us had come to Dallas about the same time in the early 80s. And Michael had actually joined the Turtle Creek Chorale on the advice of his brother, who had a business partner who was in the chorale. Some of you may have remembered B.J. Smith, a wonderful, wonderful singer, wonderful movie representative, and a great friend of ours. And I had come to Dallas to begin my career after graduating from UTMB in Galveston, and I had wanted to get into a professional, into a volunteer group where I could, meet young, professional men who, had the idea of, togetherness and family. And that's, why we joined the chorale. And when we met, we were just like head over heels with one another. Well, not initially, but later we were.
Durward and I became, we dated a couple of times, and then it really wasn't going to work out. And we had about 10 months of me still being very interested and Durward being a very good friend. And so, it was the kind of thing that friends of mine were saying, he's not being nice to you, you need to not do this. And I kept saying, I'm happier now than I've ever been, even with having him just as a friend. And so I'm a big enough boy that if I'm not happy with him, I'm capable of not doing this. One of the things I've often said is that Durward's the only person that I've ever dated for more than 3 months. And it's going to be 30 years in November.
So that November, we decided to take the weekend of Thanksgiving off and go down to Austin, where we stayed with a good friend of Michael's. And we had a wonderful weekend at this friend's home on one of the lakes in the Austin chain of lakes. And on the road trip back on 35 between, I don't know, those two little towns. I can't remember what they were called.
Lorena and Eddie.
Lorena and Eddie. My future husband had a poem that he had apparently written several weeks beforehand to try and cement this relationship that had dragged on for 9 or 10 months. And I'll just read you the first paragraph, or the first stanza of the poem. Sandy beach at sunrise with the sail down and the waves dipping up next to the cabin wall, white buildings lining hot streets, winding down to fishing boats moored in an Asian harbor. And these were the types of scenes that he wished that he could share with me. And in his little Toyota, in the passenger seat. I read this at his request, and between Eddie and Lorena, I just teared up. It was everything I wanted in life.
Me too. So that's how we met and got together and came homes together and family together. A great deal of interaction. We have been very, very lucky with our families and our employment. Both of us have been pretty much out at work through our careers, and it has worked out okay. But as to when you get to why you say I do, a lot of it comes down for me to think about all those movies I saw when I was a little kid. And they met each other and they went through their drama. And then what did they do? They got married. And that's what you're supposed to do. When we were in the first house that we had purchased together, his parents were over, my parents were over, my brother and sister-in-law, nieces and nephews, Durward's brother. And I remember sitting in the backyard thinking, except for a little bit of gender identity stuff, this is exactly the life that we were raised to live. And the life we were raised to live was one where we had a spouse.
Well, that's very well said, as far as I'm concerned. I came into the idea of marriage with my husband with, the force of a family that believed in, togetherness, and a family that believed in longevity, and, had seen through the generations the benefits of, couples being together, and in, of course, everybody's family probably, bringing forth generations of like-minded, children who became adults themselves. And when I met Michael, I saw exactly the same thing. I was brought to Royal China up in North Dallas by Michael's parents, and that's where I was introduced to his brother and sister-in-law, and that's where I got to know his parents. And I realized, oh my goodness, this is exactly what I want. This is exactly what I've sought, for in a mate. And, I had absolutely no trouble, introducing my, new husband to my family, because he could see the same thing, in my family that I saw in his. We've traveled with both of our parents, both of our parents' uncles and aunts and cousins throughout a 30-year marriage. I also would say about home, we would be remiss without mentioning that Jack and George have provided us with one wonderful home after another during the course of our marriage, and we cannot be happier than to know that they are here and that they are the core of this organization.
So the wedding. The wedding took place in Vancouver in July 11, 2004. And the wedding started on Valentine's Day 2004, sitting at the dinner table in our house, watching Gavin Newsom on the steps of San Francisco City Hall.
Really handsome Gavin Newsom.
And we were sitting at the dinner table and watching what he was doing. And Durward turned to me and said, well, we should get married. And I was like, well, that's right, we should. And so there began a lot of calls. Durward sat on the phone with San Francisco City Hall trying to get an appointment. We got an appointment, I think, on March 19th. I called my family to let them know it was happening, really just to say, it's not for you to come, it's just to let you know we're not sneaking around, to which everyone in our family responded, you don't want us there? Of course we're coming. So, and that went on until about March 16th when the California Supreme Court quashed it. And everybody had made travel plans, we had all this stuff put together, and it got put aside.
So we're still wearing our rings that we purchased for the ceremony, and they have engraved in them March 19th, 2004. Nevertheless, 3 or 4 months later, in July of 2004, we found ourselves in Vancouver and had notified our family and friends that we were going to get married in Vancouver, Canada, instead of San Francisco. Well, everybody wanted to come again. I arranged to have a hotel in the hotel district of Vancouver that gave a marriage package to gay and lesbian families that wanted to celebrate a marriage. We had a wonderful ceremony out in the large park. I can't remember. Stanley Park. It's sort of in the peninsula of the Vancouver Bay, and it was in the Rose Garden, and it was just lovely in July. I mean, you can't miss it. We had family, cousins, my godchildren were there, and it was honestly lovely.
Our photographer was the plaintiff in the case that legalized marriage in British Columbia, and our officiant was one of the first ones to do any of the gay marriages there. We had some friends who lived in Vancouver who we had talked to. They had helped us set it up, and when they were coming through Stanley Park to get to the wedding, they were dressed very nicely, and they said as they were walking through the park, people were like, oh, you're going to the gay wedding, it's over there. And but so, I mean, it was just, when you stand there, and we had been together 19 years at the time that we did that. And Mark and Vic having the second anniversary is pretty swell because it's 2 chances to celebrate. But when you stand up in front of your family and friends, and even after 19 years, you take those vows to each other, it is a very meaningful thing.
So one last comment. When we, after the wedding ceremony and after a weekend of being with family and friends in Vancouver, they all scattered to great vacation destinations in Canada, as did we. And we decided that we were going to spend our honeymoon in Seattle. So we took a bus from Vancouver down to Seattle. And the one thing that I remember quite clearly was when we crossed the border into the United States, of course the United States Customs officer asked us what our purpose of travel to Canada was. And we said, oh, well, we went up there to get married. And this young, blonde kid from Dallas, Texas, who was stationed up there at the customs office, says, oh, congratulations. Welcome back to the United States. And Michael and I were so thrilled because we knew, as everyone here knows, that the core values of this country are really, really deep-hearted and so gracious and so good. And so it just gave us a thrill that not only was Canada welcoming to us, but our first, American in America was welcoming us too. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.